All right, let's fully dive into this Joe Burrow stuff. We talked about it at the top, how, he had spoke, obviously, after the game against Buffalo. And, we've kind of noticed some things recently with Joe Burrow at the podium. Didn't get him at the podium when he was hurt, missed a ton of time with that toe injury. And then after the Raven game, really was kind of emotional. We hadn't really seen that side of him. Clearly very happy to be back. And it kind of has done him 180 ever since that game. We had after the loss, it was kind of like, that's not really the Joe Burrow that we're used to seeing. Just kind of, that's the way the cookie crumbles this year. And it's like, that didn't seem like Joe Burrow. And then very interesting his comments yesterday there as well. And I'm watching the press conference live, and I'm like, well, this doesn't feel great. And I had a feeling that it was going to explode on Twitter and the internet, and it certainly did. As kind of the fan base was in a frenzy, and you got people nationally talking about it too, like, oh, is the end nearing here with Joe Burrow? Is the writing on the wall? Is he not going to be the quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals for the long term? And it's easy to hit the panic button when it comes to that. I don't have an issue really with people hitting the panic button. It's easy to overreact to it as well. Reed on off the bench kind of took the route of I'm not going to turn a blind eye to it, but I'm not going to turn it into something it isn't. And I think he's right for the most part, but I do think it is worth being a little bit concerned about, if I'm being completely honest, because this organization is holding on by a thread. Literally a thread. And some would argue it's not even holding on, right? But the thread that is holding this thing together is Joe Burrow. And if he wants to get out of here, go somewhere else, not play anymore, this thing's going to completely blow up. You think it's ugly now, right? You think it's painful now? Well, if you remove Joe Burrow from this equation, it's going to get a heck of a lot worse. And I've said this multiple times on the show. There's no way to, understand whether this is true or not, but in my opinion, if you mess things up during the Joe Burrow era and you can't win playoff games more than what you've already done in the past in the Joe Burrow era, it's never going to work here, ever, regardless of who you bring in, because it's going to be the same ownership family. We'll see how long Duke Tobin's allowed to stick around, but once that family's here and it's still the Bengals, right, and if you couldn't win with him, couldn't have success with him, this whole thing is going to get a heck of a lot uglier than it already is. So that's where my mind goes. And, I've talked about this on the show. When I'm watching the Cincinnati Bengals, is there things to be frustrated? Yes, right? The defense, right? The offensive line at one point, although they're playing well now. The coaching has been an issue. Certainly the personnel, right, has been awful. The players in which you're drafting, lots to be frustrated. But, I used to get really worked up about that kind of stuff and really mad about it. But as a fan, I'm not talking as, the host of the show here. I'm just talking as a fan. I've been able to pivot off that and say, you know what, Joe Burrow's here. As long as he's here, it's going to be entertaining to watch. As long as he is here, we still have a chance. And as long as he's here, I'm going to give everything I have into this team from a fan's perspective because it's a heck of a lot of fun to watch him play. So when you hear comments like that, your mind immediately goes to the worst. You're like, oh, my goodness, what if he is not here with the Cincinnati Bengals? And look, that's not something that's going to happen next year, right? He will be back for next year, and it's not something that will happen after that either. But he talks about the fun, losing the fun in the game of football. And to me, I was thinking about this and texting with a buddy about this. The fun for Joe Burrow, obviously, he loves the game. In order to be in the NFL, you have to love the game at some point. Does he love it as much as he did when he was a kid or at LSU? Maybe not, right? But he loved the game as a kid. All these quarterbacks did. That's how they get to this point. You can't not love the game at some point in your life and get to this point. But I think for him, especially after the success they had early in his career, after the knee injury, of course, as a rookie, the fun for him is postseason. Right, is chasing postseason, is going on a postseason run. And when you have a guy of his caliber at that position, you should be making the playoffs every single year, right? Regardless of your offensive line, regardless of your defense, regardless of the coaching, regardless of the scouting, regardless of the personnel, you should be making the playoffs each and every year. He played all the games last year. You didn't make it. And T and Jamar, for the most part, were healthy throughout the duration of the year as well. That's really hard to wrap your head around, right? I mean, you watched the game against Buffalo Sunday, right? He was doing that all last year, and he had Jamar and T out there with him, and you were losing games left and right and couldn't make the playoffs. And then this year, of course, he gets hurt, right? But all you needed was one. I mean, certainly 2 or 3, you'd be in a great spot, but literally one more win without him. And again, you got competent quarterback play from Joe Flacco. Side tangent, all the people say, oh, you can still win with Flacco. Is Flacco doing that in Buffalo? We love Joe Flacco. We love what he's done here, but absolutely not. He's not. All right, let's be real. But the quarterback play there was fine. It was serviceable. It was as good as you could have hoped for on your third quarterback with Joe Flacco, right? And that still wasn't enough to even get an extra win. So he's just kind of exasperated. And he understands that, if you turn the ball over twice in Buffalo against Josh Allen, odds are you're not going to win. But how great he was before that, he's just like, I mean, I can't even make one mistake out here, and we're going to lose. So I think you're seeing that bubble up, that frustration. I mentioned this on Off the Bench as well. For us, the reality of this season sunk in a long time ago, several weeks ago, right? Probably, in my opinion, after the Bear game is when it really sunk in, like, you know what? This is going to be a team, once again, that misses the playoffs. That's when I kind of had, because I called that game a must-win game for the Bengals against Chicago at home. And, you know, you were losing most of the game, and then you, by a miracle, get back in it and have the lead, and then Bengal fashion, you lose it there at the end. But to me, losing that game, that was it for the postseason. Well, Joe Burrow's not wired like that. As he was motivated towards trying to come back, I guarantee you, I haven't spoken with Joe, obviously, but in his mind, he's thinking, I'm going to come back and we're going to run the table and we're going to get into the playoffs. And then for him, the moment that we had, or that I had during the Bear week, some of you had it before that, some of you had it maybe a week or two after that, he didn't have that moment until this week. Until losing to the Buffalo Bills, where he sits up there and he goes, oh, shoot, we can run the table here, and it's still not going to probably happen for the Cincinnati Bengals. So that moment that we all had as fans where this thing's over, we're not making the playoffs, he didn't have that moment until this week, right? So I think that's why you're kind of seeing some of the frustration that you saw in the press conference, right? You couple that with what I said earlier about him not making the playoffs. The reason that he has fun in this game, the reason that he is here is to go on the run in the postseason. He believes he's the caliber of player that should be in the postseason each and every year. And now you look, 3 straight years, the Bengals have been out. Now, if he's been healthy for all 3 of those years, I don't think that's the case, right? I think a healthy Joe Burrow this year wins the AFC North, right? I didn't think that before the year, but I didn't expect the Ravens to be this bad, right? If you just insert a healthy Joe Burrow into this Bengals team, regardless of the issues on defense, I think they're in the driver's seat at this point in the AFC North. Last year, he was healthy the whole year. Wasn't able to happen. Then the year prior to that, had the injury there as well with the wrist. So I think that's where you're kind of seeing some of the frustration lie. Now, the question becomes after that, is he frustrated with the organization, or is he just kind of mourning not making the playoffs again? I would hope it's just the playoff thing. But there's plenty of reason to be frustrated with this organization. But also, the organization pretty much has done exactly what Joe Burrow has wanted, right? Let's be very clear here. The Bengals were not bringing back T. Higgins until Joe Burrow was banging the table for T. Higgins, right? And then they're like, oh, Joe said it, so we got to go out there and do it. They did it, right? They obviously were going to pay Jamar. We know that. I don't know if they bring back Mike Gesicki, if Joe Burrow wasn't pounding the table. He did. I don't know if they give Trey Hendrickson that raise if Joe Burrow wasn't pounding the table. He did. They did, right? So they've done, say what you want about the Bengals organization. They deserve a lot of crap, trust me. But as far as Joe Burrow's, don't want to say demands, but his asks, pretty much checked all the boxes, right? And you've kind of seen this in the past. Like, well, you don't want your star players being involved with personnel stuff. I kind of took a different standpoint with Joe Burrow just because the nature of this Bengals organization, how dysfunctional they've been throughout the course of my life, and you have this talent at the most important position that's such a great player. I'm like, well, let's not take him off. Let's do what he wants, right? Is it coming back to bite him? I'm not ready to say that personally. I still will stand here today and say it was the right thing to pay T and pay Jamar and pay Joe, so you kept those 3 guys together. Makes things difficult defensively, and you're seeing that. But again, in the what-if world, in fairyland, right, what isn't reality, I think the Bengals are a playoff team, regardless of how bad their defense is, if Joe didn't get hurt this year and was out there throughout the entirety of the year. So he's frustrated, clearly. I do believe there is an opt-out in his contract after 27. And, maybe he opts out regardless just to try to get more money. Again, though, that kind of is a counter-argument to, or it's counterintuitive to what I was saying about, Joe wanting postseason success, where it's like, well, if he opts out of that and wants more money, it's like, well, do you want more money when you're getting paid $50+ million, or do you want to have a better roster to go to a Super Bowl, right? So, I don't know. So a lot of people probably think he will opt out, whether it be for financial reasons or if he wants to try to get out of here in Cincinnati. And I do think these next 2 years are so big, right, for Joe. And, again, you got your fingers crossed that he doesn't have another major injury that he can't play through, because that's got to take a toll on you mentally. And that's another element to this I think some people are failing to understand. Like, we see Joe Burrow, and he's this superstar, and he's this great player. He's also a human being, right? Can you imagine putting all that work in and being as good as he is at his job and then just constantly getting hurt? I mean, it's really starting to stockpile all the injuries that he has had and the adversity that he's had to overcome. And then he comes back and plays great, and it's still not enough. So that's got to take a toll on you mentally. And, I've said this before, that is worst case scenario. I try not to overreact with anything with this team. But if Joe Burrow ultimately is playing for a different team or wants out, that is a nightmare situation for the Bengals. Sound the alarms, hit all the panic buttons. You're in deep trouble, right? If you're the city of Cincinnati, if you're the Bengals organization, and certainly if you're this fan base, if he wants out. Now, there's still some time to get this fixed, right? He will be back next year. And again, you go into next year saying there is absolutely no way you should miss the playoffs. Well, we said that this year, and we said it last year as well. And then you had the risk the year before. That was kind of a fluky thing. But they shouldn't have missed the playoffs any of these years, and they have consistently. So we'll see. And then the other element is that what if he just doesn't want to play football anymore? I'm not suggesting that's the case, right? We see Joe Burrow, the guy, the maniac that worked to come back here with this toe injury, to come back on a bad team and have a Hail Mary chance of getting to the playoffs. He still is driven, and I think certainly after maybe a couple of weeks this offseason, regroup, hopefully he can get to the offseason healthy and go from there, right? But I think he'll kind of get that juice back in him after that and be motivated for next year. But people used to compare him to Andrew Luck, and I used to kind of laugh at it and say, come on, Joe Burrow, he's a crazy competitor, no shot. Well, now he's a couple years ago talking about his football mortality, and now he has this press conference where he's like, I got to try to have fun again, or else what's the point of doing it? I would be shocked if he stepped away from the game. I would be incredibly shocked if he did. But let's not act like he needs the money. He's made enough money. He can make a heck of a lot more, but he's made plenty of money to suit him and his family the rest of his life. Ultimately, if that's a decision that he felt like he needed to be made. Now, luckily, he hasn't had head injuries, but he's had, lots of other bodily injuries. I think it's worth talking about at some point, especially when he has a press conference like that. So I don't want to overreact to any of his comments, but I do think the takeaway from that is not great, right? That's kind of my takeaway. Not great. I don't want to sit here and say, he's leaving, we're cooked. That's it. It's over. But at the same time, it's not all sunshine and rainbows here. And winning cures it all. Winning fixes everything. Unfortunately for the Bengals, I think it's too little too late regardless of what they do. If they run the table, they still need a ton of help. We understand that. I think it's safe to say that they're not making the playoffs this year. But it'll be very interesting to monitor kind of his tone, what he has to say. And look, unfortunately, it's going to be must-see TV or must-see streaming when Joe Burrow takes the podium from here until the next time you make the playoffs, right? Now, as someone that is not making $50 million a year, there's part of me that says, show up, play the best you can. You're the quarterback. Try to overcome this thing. You're getting paid a ton of money. You're really good. Try to figure this thing out. There's a part of me that thinks that, right? But there's also the human element of that. Okay, put the money aside. And he's just, a regular guy out there that's been getting hurt left and right. He's faced all this adversity. He's played really, really well, and his team has not really helped him out from a defensive perspective, from an offensive line perspective. I understand that, but my takeaway is don't sound the alarm, but not great. Not great is my takeaway. And, we'll see. We'll monitor that situation over the course of the next few weeks, and we'll see how he continues to respond, how he continues to play, and go from there. But you start thinking about him in a different uniform, and you're like, golly. I mean, shoot. If it was a trade situation, McVay would give him 4 first-rounders to Cincinnati and get Burrow over there, and they would hardly lose games. They would win left and right. But obviously that's a nightmare situation for Bengals fans, and don't think we need to fully have that discussion here. Don't want to overreact, but not great.